Hi, my name is Hugh Massengill. I identify as a psychiatric survivor, someone who's gone through multiple emotional crises, several times involving intervention by the police or other authorities. And I would like to spend a few minutes talking about the experience of being in an emotional crisis from the inside and what it's like going through the intervention process. I unfortunately don't have a lot of positive suggestions because they involve things with a lot of money. But I think I can be of use to folks who have to do crisis intervention all the time by talking about what I went through, what it really feels like. Right now I'm 63 and I'm doing fine, but in the mid-70s I, for various reasons, had some very severe emotional problems. And initially, I started getting very suicidal. I ended up quitting my job back in Connecticut, taking what savings I had, traveling around the country, and then going to San Francisco, first sort of unconsciously and then consciously devoted to jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. I was despairing. There was a lot in my life that certainly let me understand why that was happening. But I never asked for help. For a week I tried to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. Every morning I would walk out to it or I'd grasp a rail. And it wasn't a gesture, nobody knew I was there. But unlike some people, at the end of the week I realized that I did not have the resolve to jump. So then I went to a hospital and said, trying to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge, can you help me? And they locked me up for 3 days, and then I left. And I got pretty much no help there. There was no crisis intervention because I never asked for any, and I was doing everything I could to make sure no one saw my emotional distress. That's an important point, I think, because I think a lot of what I was going through was because I could not say, and I was not aware of how badly hurt I was. So it's very hard for people who work in crisis intervention to help people sometimes because they're not going to ask for help and they're doing everything they can to show that they're normal. Whereas inside, they're going through absolute hell. I really was suicidal. I really wanted to die. I was despairing in that beautiful city. But at that point, I did not ask for help. As long as my despair stayed despair, I was never a real problem to anyone, so I was never part of an intervention process. I ended up voluntarily hospitalizing myself several times at Napa State Hospital and a hospital in San Francisco. And then I went back to Connecticut where I was raised and got into, by then all my emotions were coming out. And I got into major emotional battles with my parents. My mother insisted I go to the VA, which made sense. I got very little help then, and there. I was still no intervention, but I went voluntarily. And when I was in the VA facility for a couple of days in Newington, Connecticut, 4 big guys just grabbed me and hauled me off to Norwich State Hospital. That was their crisis intervention. I don't, to this day, I don't know why it happened, but a state hospital is a horrible place. I was a total stranger to myself. I did not know what was going on, but I was not out of control. I was not, in the sort of standard sense, psychotic. I just was very, very suicidal. In the state hospital, I won't go into all those details, but after I got out, then I started getting psychotic from 1975 to 1977. Probably in a 3-year period, I spent at least 2 out of the 3 years involuntarily committed to state hospitals or VA mental hospitals. They at the time diagnosed me as chronic paranoid schizophrenic. The diagnosis has since been changed to post-traumatic stress. So that's a little bit of my history. In 1975, as I was trying to get off those horrible psych drugs, from my perspective, I did what people shouldn't do, is I walked away from it. And all that very emotional pain came out at once. I could not handle it. I ended up going psychotic. I was in Willimantic, Connecticut at the time, trying to go back to school. And day by day, my anxiety level rose until finally one day I could not handle it, and I just walked out of town and spent a night sleeping in the woods. And then the next day, I was just wandering around, and a woman came out and saw me there, and she gave me a sandwich. And she said that she was going to call my parents, which they did. And I then turned around, walked into their garage, opened the door, and begged their car to help me because someone was trying to kill me. That was very psychotic. That was irrational. But just prior to that, a few hours before, a state trooper had stopped and talked to me. And as I remember, a very gentle way, said, people are wondering why you're wandering around, what's going on. But because I was no way I was ever going to tell anybody what was going on, I said, oh no, fine, whatever. And because I wasn't breaking any laws, he left me alone. I think that wasn't a bad tactic. I had a human right to try and handle things on my own, although I was out of control. So he left, and then I went on and begged that car to help me. I ended up going to the VA hospital and various other places. That period involved, think of a nightmare, a very bad nightmare you've had, and then you wake up and you're horrified, but nothing's really happened because your body does something really wonderful. It turns off your legs so you can't walk around. But imagine being in that nightmare and walking yourself, just walking around the streets. That's what I was going through, and most people who are going through psychotic episodes go through. It's a living, walking nightmare where they cannot control themselves, and inside they're horrified, and they're trying to act like they know what they're doing, and they're in control, but they're just sort of a little awareness over here, and the rest is happening automatically. To this day, I don't know why I begged that car to help me. After that, I had several other psychotic episodes. One involved, again, when I was trying to get off those drugs, and I won't get all that stuff now. I became a traveler and a wanderer, and I just hopped on Greyhound buses. And on one bus, I just stood up. I wasn't yelling or anything, I just stood up, so divorced from my feelings, I don't to this day know why it hit me. And when the driver pulled into Port Authority in New York, a couple officers were waiting for me, and their intervention was to very gently lead me into some office, saying something about something, and they got my ID and they called my parents, and they locked me up. As far as I know, I wasn't arrested. Thank you, because I hadn't really done anything wrong, and I didn't resist them. I was totally bewildered by now. My parents came and hauled me off. Again, a walking, living nightmare. When you're in a mental emotional crisis, sometimes it makes very little sense to you. And so if someone comes up to you and talks to you, you can't give them any really intelligent answers. And it's, well, anyway, it's just so scary. And so the state trooper who talked to me a while previous to that and saw that I wasn't breaking any laws and I wasn't going to go with him or whatever, left me alone. I think that was a good tactic. Later on, when I was on the bus, and they didn't do anything, but when the bus pulled in and they saw that something was wrong, I was met, and they escorted me, and for my own safety, they locked me up in this small cell, the only time in my life I've ever been locked up. As far as I know, never charged with anything. Although they mumbled a lot about Bellevue and told me how scary it was. I think what they wanted me to do was just stay there. But I had nowhere to go and nothing to do, and I had no money, so I said, what the hell? And then my parents came and took me off to the VA. Again, the intervention got me out of the situation, but it didn't get me into anything else.